morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your detailed forecast update for January 16th, 2024. A lot to get through today, including severe thunderstorms, strong ones at that expected across the southeast of Queensland and the northeast of New South Wales. Heavy falls are now materialising on the New South Wales central coastline as well. We'll talk about rain and thunderstorms across the northern areas of Queensland as well, heatwave conditions across interior parts of Australia and down into the southwest of Western Australia, and a tropical cyclone expected to develop offshore from Western Australia this weekend. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you're brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things today with a look at the southeast Queensland weather forecast. Now, we're not going to spend too long over here, considering it's just one more day of severe thunderstorms expected across the southeast corner of Queensland before a bit of a return to calmer conditions across the southeast of Queensland. You can see that we are expecting some really good thunderstorms today. I would just like to start things off by talking about the convective available potential energy. Now, you know this is a favourite of the CyclonesOZ channel. We're looking at this all of the time here, and you're probably also familiar with the numbers around here. So 2,500 being the benchmark for a good day of thunderstorms, 3,000 being a really good day for thunderstorms. Well, take a look at this. Right now, at this time of the day, 4,100 joules per kilogram. Again, it's an arbitrary number, but it is a massive number indeed. That means there is a lot of instability and a lot of convective energy for these thunderstorms to make the most of, just offshore from Brisbane and the Gold Coast into the southeast of Queensland and the northeastern corner of New South Wales. Now, these values are also only going to rise as the day goes on. You can see values up to into the high 4,000s later on this afternoon, and then around that kind of 4,500 to 5,500 mark later on this afternoon and into this evening. Huge values indeed, coupled with very warm temperatures. Brisbane expecting a top of 35 degrees today, and it's going to be a humid one as well. Temperatures into the mid-30s along the Sunshine Coast and low 30s across the Gold Coast and into the northeast of New South Wales as well, coupled with this low pressure system here and ideal winds and wind directions for a monster severe thunderstorm outbreak. That all comes together to really promote the perfect conditions across the southeast of Queensland for thunderstorms later on this afternoon. The only saving grace here as to why we're not seeing a monster severe thunderstorm outbreak on the forecast, and again I will go into a little bit of detail with this in just a few seconds, the only saving grace here is that this low pressure system is just going to be located too far offshore, and the favourable winds that are going to be bringing in all of that tropical moisture from the north are again going to be a little bit further offshore, which means that thunderstorms are very likely to fire up adjacent to the coastline, further offshore from the coastline, but not so much over the southeast of Queensland. That doesn't say though that we're not expecting severe thunderstorms there. Yes, there will certainly be some severe thunderstorms in and around the Brisbane metro area. Same deal for the Gold Coast and extending up into the southern areas of the Sunshine Coast as well, pretty much up to about Maroochydore, Noosa at the absolute most northern end of the side of things here. We'll be seeing some storms with some embedded heavy rainfall, some tropical downpours actually, just given the moisture content that some of these clouds are going to be holding, and some damaging winds as well. Large hailstones are also a possibility, especially considering the instability in the atmosphere. There's going to be a lot of rising air across the southeast of Queensland, but again, it doesn't look overly likely at this time. Conditions are very favourable if you take a look at it purely from an instability standpoint, but just given where the trough and the low pressure system is, just being slightly too far offshore, it does look like they are going to be, that will be the southeastern corners of Queensland. That'll be their saving grace this afternoon and even evening. It doesn't look like we're going to see a monster severe thunderstorm outbreak there. I do certainly still expect some severe thunderstorms, especially across the northeast of New South Wales, north of Lismore up to about the Gold Coast, and then maybe an outbreak or two north of the Brisbane metro area up to Noosa, including Maroochydore and Redcliffe, those areas. We could be seeing some good thunderstorms there, and some great thunderstorms expected to materialise later on tonight, much further offshore associated with this low pressure system. And when I say monster thunderstorms, I mean some really big thunderstorms indeed expected to pop up further offshore. They'll have some really heavy rainfall. They'll look very impressive on the radar imagery as well, and if you have a good view of the coast, then you're going to get a great light show later on tonight looking over towards the east, especially if you're on the Gold Coast, that's for sure. It does look like it is going to be a really favourable night for some of these thunderstorms just offshore, which is really good to see. Again, a light show, no one's going to be shying away from a light show, but again, probably a little bit disappointing for thunderstorm lovers across the southeast of Queensland. Now, it is going to be really warm across the southeast of Queensland today. Like I said, 35 for Brisbane, and then mid-30s across the Gold Coast, and up into the high 30s, in fact, across parts of the Sunshine Coast. Gympie and Kingaroy both expecting tops of 37 degrees today, so it is going to get quite warm indeed. Sorry, not Kingaroy expecting a top of 37. Guyanda expecting a top of 37. Edisvold 39, Taroom 39, Billawheeler 39, and again, with the humidity values here at around sort of 30 to 40%, it is going to feel a little bit warmer across some of these locations, especially into the southeastern corner of Queensland. I mean, you can see here Brisbane expected to get up into the mid-30s and those humidity values hovering around 40 to 50%. Not as high as normal, though, across the southeast of Queensland for this time of the year, so it will feel a little bit dry, and that is why these thunderstorms aren't going to be popping up left, right and centre across the southeast of Queensland. I don't know how many times I've said the southeast of Queensland in the last 5 minutes, probably more than a few dozen, so we'll head out of the southeast of Queensland now and talk about the New South Wales side of things, because there is some interesting weather on the forecast. Just before we do that, though, pushing the forecast forward, you can see nothing in the way of significant thunderstorms expected for the remainder of this week. A couple of showers possible tomorrow and on Saturday, but in the way of thunderstorms, we're looking out until at least Australia Day for a return of these thunderstorms, and probably a little bit longer than that at this time. So again, good news if you're looking forward to a bit of dry weather across the southeast of Queensland, but if you do want or need the rainfall, then it's not necessarily a really good forecast over the next 14 days. Let's talk about this low pressure system offshore from the central coast of New South Wales, because it is delivering more than one problems in terms of rainfall across the central coast, especially for locations between Sydney right up to Coffs Harbour. There is going to be some heavy falls materialising from this afternoon. Its low pressure system will wrap itself up quite nicely actually over the course of this afternoon, halfway between Newcastle and Lord Howe Island, and it's going to be driving plenty of rainfall ashore across the southern and the eastern side of this system, the western side rather of this system. It's going to be behaving like an east coast low as well, making the most of the tropical waters or the tropical-like waters offshore from the coast of New South Wales, firing up plenty of convection, so it will have a lot of rain wrapping around its centre here. But it looks like it might just be far enough offshore as to where the rainfall isn't a massive problem for the New South Wales coastline. It will still be a problem for locations between Newcastle up to about Kempsey, with where this low pressure system is going to be located, kind of on this bend sort of area here, so Forster, Taree, Newcastle and the Barrington Tops, like we talked about yesterday, expecting some good falls from this system, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a situation where it's right up hugging the coastline and just driving hundreds of millimetres of rainfall ashore across the central coast of New South Wales. Now, I can imagine just what the Facebook guys are saying on this system here, probably calling for 500 millimetres of rainfall. This is not a serious weather threat at this time. It is going to create some severe weather, more than likely for locations between Newcastle and Kempsey in the way of damaging winds and isolated pockets of heavy rainfall. 6-hourly totals could be up to about 80 or 90 millimetres from this weather event here, and wind gusts as well, probably up towards the 50 knot mark. In fact, probably a little bit stronger actually. Yeah, you can see 50 to 60 knot wind gusts, so it will still be fully fledged severe weather, and it'll feel a lot like an east coast low along the New South Wales coastline looking into tonight and into early tomorrow morning, but it isn't going to be an absolute monster storm here. It's certainly something we receive a couple of times a year along the New South Wales central coast. The rainfall will continue through Friday. It will be heavy at times for locations between Newcastle and Taree, especially the Barrington Tops. You know exactly where you are when you pick up those significant rainfall totals, and like I said earlier, 6-hourly rainfall accumulations could be up to about 80 millimetres and mounted over 48 hours. The rainfall will then really begin to pile on there. Showers extending as far south as Wollongong, so Sydney and Wollongong both expecting cool blustery days tomorrow, and especially a cool blustery start to the weekend with plenty of showers in the vicinity there, and then moderate to heavy showers expected between Taree and Coffs Harbour continuing through Saturday morning and easing off Saturday afternoon by the looks of things, and then the rain pretty much clearing out completely from the central coast Sunday morning, maybe Sunday early afternoon around the Coffs Harbour and the Kempsey area. Again, it is only going to last for a couple of days here. These systems normally aren't too long-lived. They certainly form pretty much as quick as they die, or they die pretty much as quick as they form, as the saying goes here offshore from New South Wales. So this system here won't have much of a life ahead of it. In fact, it's pretty much dissipated by late tomorrow night into Saturday morning, but the rainfall will continue, like I said, for the New South Wales central coast around Taree, Forster and Kempsey throughout early Saturday morning, but the heaviest falls should clear out by about lunchtime on Saturday. Let's just talk about those rainfall accumulations right now. They have been back down a little bit from yesterday's forecast, and that is good news indeed. We were talking about some pretty significant rainfall yesterday, but I also did say take that with a heavy pinch of salt. I don't expect it to materialise as per how the forecast models were suggesting. The heaviest falls will be between Newcastle and Coffs Harbour, so locations including Kempsey, Port Macquarie, Taree, Forster, and especially inland out towards the Barrington Tops and Mossel Brook, some really heavy falls possible out there. Up to about 250 millimetres expected for the Barrington Tops, which I do imagine they will be the wettest location from this weather event here. They very normally are when you see an east coast low develop offshore from the New South Wales central coast, but in this case very much especially so. This is where the heaviest falls are going to be. Newcastle will probably see about 60 or 70 millimetres depending on what showers come through today. They could see a little bit more than that, but I reckon 60 millimetres is a pretty good number to put on the forecast here. I've got no reason to doubt that. And then Taree and Forster will probably pick up about 150 millimetres apiece, probably a little bit more as you get north towards Taree, and then some of the mountains adjacent to Taree and Port Macquarie could be seeing up to about 200 millimetres out there, and potentially even more than that as well, especially if you live in a a bit of a rain den. In some of those valleys there, you can see just the clouds and the sky get wrung completely dry from some of the rainfall that streams in ashore from the New South Wales coast. The East Australian current as well, might I add, is piping hot offshore from New South Wales, 26, running it up to about 27 degrees Celsius here offshore. So these showers, once they get themselves going and head towards the coastline, they're going to have pretty much an infinite supply of moisture as they get themselves across towards New South Wales and Taree, and especially for locations between Taree and Kempsey, like I said, around the Port Macquarie area, and some of the mountains just inland from that, they are going to be facing some very heavy rainfall because of how the evaporation is going to work just offshore from the coastline. Sea temperatures about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above average. Not good stuff, and that's why so much rainfall is expected from this event here. Short story is 250 millimetres coming through. It's nothing to write home about, or it is certainly something to write home about, I guess, across the New South Wales Central Coast. We're not talking about fully tropical locations of Australia just yet, but it isn't anything absolutely absurd, and it is expected for this time of the year as well. So stay safe, stay calm in a weather event like this, and if you live in a really flood-prone area, then I would recommend preparing for some flooding right now. Especially, it's not going to take much for these river levels to get pushed across to the minor or the moderate flooding alert, and especially considering a lot of this rainfall is going to come in more of a torrential downpour as opposed to a steady fall type situation here, and as such that rainfall is going to come in thick and fast and really start to build quite rapidly as well. Rainfall accumulations, generally speaking, across the next week across southern parts of Australia, nothing interesting, nothing really to write home about either. In terms of rainfall for Tasmania, Victoria, South Australia, not expecting anything. Same deal with New South Wales and Queensland for the most part as well. Nothing really significant on the forecast until we push it out to the 14-day period here, and we're now really starting to see some proper tropical rainfall, and you can hear the excitement building in my voice here. It's been a while, it's been nearly a year when I've seen this rainfall pipe up around the Daintree rainforest and the Cassowary coast, and I imagine about as many people are as excited as me with this, just considering the fact that this is the first run of real tropical rainfall coming in for the Cassowary coast. Unfortunately though, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, you're going to have to wait about a week and a half for this rainfall to begin to pipe up. We've seen it on the forecast of the last couple of days. It's actually been really consistent with the forecast, and the models are really supporting this event now. But from Australia Day onwards, Sunday the 26th of January onwards, we're going to have plenty of rainfall coming through, so you can get extra hammered while that rain falls across the Cassowary coast on Australia Day, because you've got Monday off just to enjoy the tropical rainfall that's going to be falling up there. Hundreds of millimetres a day expected to come through on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then into Tuesday, right through until about the 29th or the 30th of January, when that rainfall will then begin to ease off. But it's going to coincide with another high energy period across the Cape York Peninsula and the Coral Sea as a whole, which means tropical moisture streaming in from the east, heading east to west across the Coral Sea, arriving in the Cassowary coast and the Daintree rainforest by about the 27th through to the 28th of January. And some huge falls are expected. I mean, you can see here 3 hourly rainfall that totals around that 20 to 30 millimetre mark. Of course, it's just a model prediction. There will be pockets of much higher rainfall accumulations, much higher rainfall rates, and also pockets of much lower rainfall rates. But when we start to see these oranges and reds start to materialise on the forecast, you know some serious rainfall is now about to build for the far northern areas of Queensland. Now, we're looking very far out into the future. This is still about 2 weeks away, or about 10 to 13 days away. So some significant time we're going to have to wait for this weather system to materialise, and there will still be some discrepancies between forecast models and details that will need to be ironed out. But the short story is significant falls expected to pipe up from Australia Day onwards. Storms beginning Australia Day morning and then through Monday and Tuesday, when the heaviest falls will be on Tuesday the 28th of January, before they clear out late Wednesday afternoon for the Daintree and early Thursday morning for other remainders of far north Queensland. But yeah, some really significant falls expected to come through here, looking really long range. It looks like this rainfall will then travel into the Gulf of Carpentaria and then maybe wrap itself up into a tropical low, which could lead to even more rainfall across the Cape York Peninsula, especially along the western side of things, extending between Thursday Island right down to Corumba. So we'll keep a very close eye on the forecast up there. Certainly is quite interesting, and a lot of variables are still at play there depending on the rainfall. But I do have a great level of confidence in saying that some significant falls are now finally expected for the end of January along the Cassowary coast and into the far north areas of Queensland just in general. For locations between Townsville up to Cooktown, significant falls there. There'll also be moderate rainfall south of Townsville right down through Bowen, the Whit Sundays down to about Mackay. We could be seeing accumulations in the 7 to 14 day period there in excess of the, well, if we can get the forecast run to play here, but in excess of the 100 millimetres or so mark. So certainly some interesting stuff, and certainly probably something to now start getting a little bit excited for if you do live around the Whit Sundays and Mackay. But the real rainfall, the rainfall trump card tide will, of course, be on the Cassowary Coast here, where, like I said, 300 millimeters expected to fall in that week-long period. And not an awful lot of rainfall in the build-up to that either. Yes, there'll be some dribs and drabs here and there, 25, 30 millimeters here and there, especially from thunderstorms. We might be seeing a little bit more rainfall across the Atherton tablelands, but you got to push this forecast right forward, and you can see the 7-day rainfall accumulations in the 14-day rainfall period here, well in excess of 300 millimeters. And again, we're talking about a pretty low ball forecast this time, so we'll likely be ending up with much more rainfall than that. But we're going to have to wait until at least the 25th of January for this rainfall to begin to pipe up. Unfortunately, that is a long wait for the far northern areas of Queensland. They definitely do need this rainfall as well. So yeah, certainly something very exciting on the forecast, and I think, dare I say, this might be something to now start to get a little bit excited for. I think it is certainly going to happen on the forecast now. Now, just before we talk about the tropical cyclone offshore from Western Australia that is slowly developing, I would just like to briefly touch on the weather situation across the southwest of Western Australia, and also say that, just in case you miss it by skipping through to the remainder of the video, Perth is not expecting a tropical cyclone in the next week. A lot of the Facebook guys have been saying that. A lot of wacky forecasts have been coming through on the news and also through Facebook. So again, make sure you are very much aware here that Perth is not expecting a tropical cyclone or a tropical low impact over the next 7 days, and probably not over the next 14 days as well. Stick around to the end of the video and I'll explain exactly what is expected for Perth in the long run from this system. We are, however, expecting a pretty warm day today, expected to go up to a top of 40 in the Perth metro area, probably a little bit warmer across some of the northern suburbs here, driven by that west coast trough that's really going to be piping those temperatures up and pumping the heat into the southern areas of the southwest corner of Western Australia. It's going to be into the mid-30s as well across the southwest just in general, so getting quite warm, and then into the high 40s expected across northern parts of the Wheatbelt and into the Murchison region, 44, 45 degrees. Starting to get quite warm up there indeed. And then I believe it's the end of this weekend when we see another return to the heat across the southwest of Western Australia. Yep, Monday the 20th of January, expecting a top of 42 on this forecast for Perth, and then Tuesday a top of 43, potentially up to 44 or 45 around the Moora or Moorawa area. Looks like those temperatures really are going to rise as this tropical low begins its intensification phase offshore from Western Australia. And that's normally how it is when we see a tropical low materialise offshore from Western Australia. Those temperatures get driven up across the southwest of Western Australia. So interesting stuff, that's for sure. But I know I've kept everyone hanging long enough, so let's talk about this tropical cyclone and what is expected from it. We'll start things off with the satellite picture right now, just taking a look at the convective bubble bath that is currently occurring offshore from Western Australia here. Wind observations as well overlaid. You can see there's not really any signs that a tropical low is starting to form here. Winds are still very light across the Pilbara and the Kimberley region, but we do have this main sort of convective ball here. That's tropical low 10U, and that is now beginning to spin itself up quite nicely and really start to show signs of tropical cyclone genesis at this time. Plenty of convection firing up around its center. So let's talk about the forecast of this system right now. Starting things off with the rainfall and the synoptic overlay here. You can see this tropical low here slowly merges into one. We've got this massive overhead gyroscope, massive overlying low pressure system offshore from the Pilbara region of Western Australia, and that's spinning around two tropical lows. Tropical low 10U here towards the northwest of Exmouth, and then tropical low 11U here, which is slowly spinning up offshore from the Kimberley region, north of about Derby, about 400 or 500 kilometers north of Derby. Now, what this means is this tropical low spins around, these tropical lows rotate around a common center of low pressure, is a lot of rainfall is expected to be driven ashore over the Kimberley coastline over the coming couple of days, piping up from about now, actually. Plenty of showers and thunderstorms streaming ashore for the Kimberley coastline, north of Broome, in fact, substantially north of Broome, extending right out towards Columbaroo, and then across into the Northern Territory as well, right out to about Darwin. The onshore flow there is going to be giving way to plenty of rainfall, probably up to about 400 millimeters of the stuff throughout tomorrow and into Saturday, and then as that low pressure system then begins to tighten up and develop on Saturday, the rainfall will then only begin to ease across the Kimberley region. Saturday night, it will begin to ease for areas around Columbaroo. Sunday morning across more central areas of the Kimberley coastline, and the rainfall continuing right through Sunday around the Broome and the Derby areas. This tropical low begins to develop, and then Sunday morning it will begin to develop across the Pilbara coastline, continuing through Sunday afternoon, easing off Sunday evening around Port Hedland, Monday afternoon for Karratha, and then that rainfall finally drawing out of the West Australian coastline by late Tuesday. That's just a look at the rainfall. Let's just talk about this tropical cyclone now and how it's expected to develop. We'll see this tropical low develop as kind of a merger of both tropical lows that we're seeing offshore from WA right now. It's a bit of a confusing forecast, especially considering the Bureau of Meteorology is still calling for two individual tropical lows to form. I don't really know why they're calling for that. It doesn't really matter what system becomes the dominant system here, whether it's 10U or 11U, it's going to form somewhere here out offshore from Broome and Port Hedland, and it is going to be kind of a merger of both systems here. On the northern side of this system and on the eastern side of the system, plenty of rainfall expected to be being drawn into the system, and that will give it the energy that's required for it to wrap itself up into a tropical low and then eventually a tropical cyclone. It's still a broad system, and it will be battling some wind shear, especially earlier on in its lifetime as a result of all the thunderstorms that it's going to be blowing up. So it will have a slow and a tricky start to life, but it will continue to deepen through Saturday, reaching tropical cyclone status by the looks of things and by my estimate here by Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening. It'll likely then start to really get itself together and rapidly intensify through Sunday night into Monday morning. We'll likely be waking up to a Category 2, potentially even a Category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone on Monday morning as the system passes well to the north of Exmouth. And if you watched yesterday's update, especially the morning update, but also the afternoon update, you can see just how similar the forecast is between the days for this system and also between the other forecast models as well. The GFS is still a little bit kind of split between the forecast, but the Axis G3 and the Eastern LBF are just neck and neck right now, both in terms of a relative intensity and also where this storm is expected to be, the rainfall and the size of the system. So there's really good model congruency with this system now, and you kind of want it considering it is only about 4 days away. This system here expected to intensify through Sunday night into Monday morning, reaching a peak intensity late Monday night into early Tuesday morning, well offshore from the WA coastline, but still bringing cyclonic conditions around the Exmouth area through Tuesday before weakening kicks in on Wednesday morning as it heads further off into the Indian Ocean. Now, what the system does here is highly dependent on what high pressure system or low pressure system is located in the Great Australian Bight or south of WA just in general. I honestly reckon that this system is going to stall and then dissipate offshore from Western Australia here, well offshore from Perth and Geraldton, and then kind of get dragged down. Maybe a couple of showers in the way for Australia Day around the southwestern corner of Western Australia as the remnants of this system here, but certainly not a tropical cyclone or even a tropical low impact at all. Not going to be a rain depression, unfortunately. Perth is not in for a good drenching. The other forecast models, the GFS calling for it to skim well out into the Indian Ocean. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I think it is actually going to end up being dragged down into the southwest towards Australia, and the Axis is also calling for that, where the system kind of gets dragged down towards the southwest of WA and then maybe impacting Perth, but again, it will only be a couple of showers by the time it gets there and completely on its last legs, that's for sure. And you can see, just a few showers as a bit of a frontal system moves through there. So again, absolutely no threat whatsoever. But we shouldn't be talking about the threat for the southwest of Western Australia. We need to be talking about the threat now for the west coast of WA here. So starting things off north and heading through south in chronological order of time. So over the coming couple of days, we're expecting heavy falls between the Broome and Columbaroo area. Like I said, up to about 400 millimetres is possible, and you can see it here on the rainfall forecast. Really significant rainfall totals are expected. Not so much reciprocated on this forecast here, but you can see 4-day rainfall accumulation is expected to be well in excess of 300 or 400 millimetres here. So some significant flooding is possible in the coastal areas. Also expect a storm tide about a metre above the highest astronomical tide up here on the high tides, just considering the low pressure that's currently located across the northwestern corner of Western Australia. Through this weekend, we're expecting heavy falls on Saturday, especially into the Broome area. Some strong winds as well. It will definitely feel like a tropical low is brewing just in Broome's backyard, and strong winds will then begin to develop for Port Hedland on Saturday afternoon and into Sunday morning. This system, like I said, becoming a tropical cyclone sometime on Sunday offshore from the WA coastline, bringing cyclonic winds likely to the outer islands north of Karratha and Port Hedland. Port Hedland is still a little bit of a wild card as to whether they receive tropical cyclone force winds, but I certainly would prepare in Port Hedland for a Category 1 or even a Category 2 strength tropical cyclone impact, and right across the coastline down to Carnarvon, I'd be preparing for cyclonic impacts. For Karratha, I would probably prepare, if I was in Karratha and I had the time to and the means to, I would prepare for a severe Category 3 strength tropical cyclone impact. It certainly does look like that system has a chance to go that way. I don't expect it to get any stronger than Category 3 strength tropical cyclone status, and it's certainly not going to landfall as a Category 3 or stronger strength system, but again, just preparing for the worst and hoping for the best there. Exmouth will likely see a sustained period of 24 hours of cyclonic or near cyclonic winds through Monday and Tuesday, so again, prepare for extensive light damage around that area, trees being brought down, power lines being brought down. It will be about a day and a half of gale force winds around the Exmouth area, and also some significant rainfall to go along with it. Every single Pilbara coastal location can expect about 150 millimetres from this event here, right down to Coral Bay. Some significant rainfall really is expected here. Exmouth will probably see about 150 millimetres, Onslow about 100 millimetres, and Karratha and Port Hedland, depending on what showers come through there, but especially for Karratha, at least 150 millimetres can be expected. Broome as well, about 150 millimetres up there. But yeah, that is basically it from this system here. It certainly is shaping up to be quite an interesting one, that's for sure, as my voice just completely disintegrates on me. I don't know why it's being so funny today. I'd be able to keep talking for quite a while longer if it wasn't for that, so I do apologise for that. Again, any questions or comments in regard to this system or the weather in general, then please do let me know in the comment section down below, or you can flick me an email as well, and I look forward to responding to that as well. So thanks so much for reaching out to me, everyone that's done it in the past. It really is much appreciated. But anyways, on that note, that is all that I have time for today. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. The names are on screen right now, and I could not run this show without them, so again, their support is much appreciated. But that is all for me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.